Hello, my name is Lisa Brazel, and we're here to talk about airbrushing with cocoa butter, and we're going to be demonstrating a flame paint that is known in the automotive industry as TrueFire. So this should be a really good test of the different disciplines and the abilities of cocoa butter, airbrush, and a lot of shield and freehand shield techniques. So hopefully you get some ideas from it and learn more about the products involved. The first thing you need to do for this technique is to have a black base, which is why cocoa butter and its opacity is really important for this technique. And then have good reference materials. I have a lot of fire printed out thanks to some pyro friends of mine. So we're going to move through sketching with white, then we're going to use a chrome yellow, then we're going to tint and shear back a couple of colors with plain cocoa butter so that we get a nice watercolor overlay of orange, red, and then we're going to come back through at the very end and clean up some design with black. And sounds rather straightforward, but there's a lot of fun technique involved, so let's get started. Okay, we're getting ready to get started, and I'm using a embosser heat gun just to keep my airbrush nice and warm. It's a lot lower temperature than regular heat guns, and because burned cocoa butter is bad. So now we're sketching. This is all freeform. I've got my reference photos down to the right of me, and I'm just kind of improvising right now. I want to have the motion of flame, but I also want a bit of composition. And this is just, again, whatever fancy strikes, but I'm just going to keep sketching and refining the design, start figuring out what's foreground, what's background. The foreground elements are going to be much crisper, much harder edges. The background is going to be darker colors and much softer. So that we've got a lot of layering and depth, and now I'm going to start figuring out where I want my color to be. So you'll see me just start put in more and more white and start filling in these shapes a little bit. And that's it for the white. Next is yellow, and I'm using as close to a chrome yellow as I can. Now I'm going to start deciding and placing hard lines by freehand at the top of my licks of the flames, and I'm going to start moving down the body and decide where the brightest part of each flame is going to be. Now I'm grabbing a shield, and if you'll notice, that shield's not flat against the surface of the paper. I'm loose and high with it so I can get a crisp edge just where I want it, and then it'll fade off to a soft edge the more distance there is between the shield and the surface. Now, because this is cocoa butter, I'm not really ever touching that shield to the surface because I'll get a drag mark. So sometimes the lines just aren't quite as tight as I'd like them to be. If I really wanted to, I could come back in at the very end and hand paint with cocoa butter. That's the hardest part of this particular project, is fitting the curve to the shape. You just have to learn to work fairly loose and quick. Otherwise, you'll be studying curves and corners and wasting a lot of time finding that perfect line when, and with fire in particular, you really don't have to. Now I'm going to just finish off and we'll move on to orange. What you see me pour in there is plain cocoa butter. It's uncolored, just plain, because I want to cut the opacity of this orange down. I want like a watercolor wash. So I'm mixing it about 50-50 because I just want to build color up. Now I'm going to go in and start building more crisp detail and edges on that foreground piece. Orange is going to go into shadows, and it's going to start defining the deeper part of each flame lick, and you'll see a lot more orange build up in the areas that are in the back of the design. From here, it's just a lot more shield is used, but it's basically the same process as with the yellow, pushing and pulling, soft lines and hard lines until I get a tighter composition, and then I'll be ready for red. Okay, I've started red, and this is pretty sheer. This is 1 part red to 3 parts plain cocoa butter, because I really want to just deepen up my oranges at this point. I'm not spraying straight red. I'll need a little bit of that later on, but for now I'm just glazing that color on there like a watercolor wash. Here we go for the more red. So it's still not full strength, and you may be able to see there how much darker that red is than what I was spraying at first. Again, freehand shield for where I want a crisp edge for a foreground flame, and then a lot of red on the soft background out of focus elements. This is when I'll start making fine-tune adjustments to shape and edges to start tightening everything up overall. So now I'm going to come back in and just pop a few details with white, and that's next. Now I'm coming in and painting tight lines just to hit highlights. And I'll come in with a little bit of freehand shield and just a little bit of subtle shading just to bring the front edge of these flames forward. And once I get done pulling in the final highlights, we'll be ready to add a little bit of shimmer and sparkle. Up until this point, I've been using a tritium side feed with a 0.5 tip, a really big tip for cocoa butter. It pretty much is my mainstay for working with cocoa butter. But since I'm adding a luster and a pearl here right now of purple and gold, I've dropped down to my 0.2 tip top feed tritium, because I'm not going to put both these products through the same airbrush on the same project. So I'm coming through with a gold pearl and a purple pearl just to get that hot look. Once I'm satisfied that I have enough shimmer on this, I'll be ready to clean up all the edges. Now I'm coming in with black. So black is going to be used to clean up all the edges, erase all the overspray. And even though I started on black fondant, because I want the same color of black on the finished piece, I'm going to spray all the non-flame areas with the black. So right now I'm using the shield because I want crisp edges up on this primary biggest flame that's most forward. And then as I'm filling in spaces, I won't use the shield, but I am angling my airbrush away from the primary work so any overspray hopefully goes off to the side. Yeah, this can be the most time-consuming part of the process, because we do have to erase some color that's already down because these colors are so opaque. And I'll also go in towards the bottom and use just a tiny bit of black to deepen the deepest reds for the coldest part of this particular fire. Now this true fire technique doesn't have to be orange and red and yellow. It can be green and yellow, it can be light and dark blue with purple accents. You really can switch it up and have some fun with it. The most important thing is layering your colors and working with crisp and soft to get foreground and background so you have that whole roaring fire depth to it. The whole process for this project is somewhere around 40 minutes or so from start to finish. It'd be perfect for a groom's cake or the centerpiece of a chocolate display, fire and ice theme. So hopefully you find a place for it in your repertoire. Well, here's the true fire we started the day with. And this one's a little crisper, a little busier. The demonstration we did today ended up being a little softer, but it's got an homage to an old school hot rod flame in there. So this technique does take practice. You do have to develop your own style, but the important thing to come away with is you can do a huge amount of blending, build a tremendous amount of opacity, and have an immense amount of range with freehand shields when airbrushing with cocoa butter. So hopefully we'll do some more projects again here soon.